that. Would you talk for a moment about the threats to the villages? I know you're concerned about that.
Well, both the seashore and the forest are now prime areas for development because especially foreigners and wealthy people now, it seems, want an ocean view. Traditionally, I think in Tamil Nadu, the seashore was considered low-class and dirty because fishing people lived there, and it was not considered prime real estate. But now it is. So here, like many places in the world, people who don't make a lot of money are under pressure to, they can't pay the rent in the new setups. So they can only really continue to live in these natural environments with the help and support of the government. So the question comes up, to what extent does a government have an obligation to help people continue living in their traditional environment? Specifically, the fishing people here in Chennai are in a situation where all of the apartment buildings along the strip near the coast are about to be rebuilt, and possibly an elevated highway is going to come right near the beach. So we don't really know if the fishing scene, community, in what form it's going to continue, or if it's going to be stopped really altogether. So I am encouraging the government to build this living museum and to make an effort to help this traditional community continue. But market forces, ever since the dissolution of the Soviet Union in, what was it, 89, 90, 91, around the world there's been the onslaught of market forces. And that has especially hit India. So that kind of development needs to be tempered, needs to be negotiated, compromised with government preserving, supporting, developing traditional communities. And myself as a folklorist, I believe that one way that the continued existence of the traditional peoples can be justified is to develop these living museums so that the traditional peoples can present the traditional culture and their knowledge of nature to the rest of the public, and in this way really be a great resource for the general public.
So the other night, it's my last question I think, the other night we did a storytelling round. You invited a number of people and we filled up your living room and we swapped stories, and I noticed, maybe because I'm here, but there was there were a number of requests for stories about healing or about dealing with traumatic situations. And I know that between the tsunami and other things that have happened to the local community, the issues of trauma loom large here, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how storytelling can help the community deal with all of the traumas that it's suffered.
Well, the tsunami really affected financially poor fishing people more than middle and upper class people. And I'm sorry to say that on this trip, you mostly have been limited in your interaction to middle and upper class people, because we have not gone into the countryside and we have not really spent much time even in the fishing neighborhoods. A large part of it is a language issue. So I'm hoping in future visits you really can interact with people in the fishing communities and in tribal communities outside Chennai. So you've been working with middle and upper class people who have great interest and sympathy for traditional healing. But the traditional healers in their own environment they might look down on, because they might feel they're too poor or too black or too ignorant, too illiterate. So there is that sort of classism here which has not come up with you because you're light-skinned, and I think in general Native Americans are considered a very high status type of tribal people. So there is that interest here in the middle and upper class, but I think a thing that has gone undiscussed with many of the audiences that you've worked with here is their relationship and their interest or their fear or lack of interest in the traditional healers in their midst. But in general, regarding the tsunami and the HIV crisis, so many NGOs have come in saying, we're going to save you. And these NGOs, in America we call them non-profit organizations, most of them have an ideology to push, like Christianity, and have very little interest in traditional ways of making things, doing things, seeing things. So I, as a folklorist, have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder in relation to these people who are coming in to save the fishing people and the tribal people. I think the best way to help the fishing people and tribal people is to remind them of the beauty and value and strength of their traditional cultures. And it's all in the details of speech, which is very hard for outsiders to even understand. So that's my response to helping people overcome trauma. Indian people in general are in an interesting position. They're not white and they're not black. So sometimes they identify with white Western people, but then sometimes they identify as indigenous people of the earth. So they can go either way with it, and one can address them in either way. So it's an interesting and delicate and fluid situation of how they see themselves.
Thank you.